The snowstorm we've been expecting is now underway, but it is brutal. It is bone-chilling, and it is dangerous.
Mess. But watch all these trucks just sitting here and see what's going on. It is going to be about 8 to 10 hours until we can get moving again.
A monster winter storm hitting the U.S., set to be the biggest in years, has turned deadly.
This is what happened when a single ice storm turned one of America's major interstate highways into a frozen parking lot and trapped hundreds of people for over 2 full days. In late January 2026, Winter Storm Fern hit northern Louisiana so hard that Interstate 20, a critical artery connecting major cities across the state, became almost completely impassable. By the time it was over, the National Guard had to pull more than 400 vehicles out of a frozen corridor that stretched up to 30 miles long. Winter Storm Fern was driven by what's called a disrupted polar vortex, and it pushed a wall of Arctic air deep into the Gulf South between January 23rd and the 27th. Northern Louisiana experienced more than 70 consecutive hours at or below freezing during that stretch, with temperatures in Shreveport plunging down to 17 degrees Fahrenheit and ice piling up to a full inch in the hardest-hit parishes. That might not sound like much if you live somewhere up north where ice storms are a fact of life, but Louisiana is simply not built for this kind of weather. And that gap between what the state could handle and what the storm actually brought is exactly where this disaster started. Saturday night, January 24th, that's when the whole thing began to unravel. 18-wheelers started jackknifing on the icy roads near a town called Minden in Webster Parish, and each one that stopped triggered another vehicle to lose control behind it. Louisiana State Police Trooper Ryan Davis put it plainly, saying the interstate froze again overnight and created additional problems as more vehicles lost control, one after another, in a chain reaction that kept building through the night. Stranded vehicles ended up blocking both travel lanes and the shoulders, which meant drivers had absolutely nowhere to navigate around the obstructions. The stretch of I-20 that got hit ran from Minden eastward through Arcadia, through Ruston, and all the way into Monroe and West Monroe. And at its absolute worst, 99.9% of the roadway was blocked. Trooper Eddie Thomas described 14 miles of congestion on the western side alone, while Ruston Mayor Ronnie Walker told reporters the gridlock stretched across 20 to 30 miles total. Cars were getting pinned between two 18-wheelers with no way to move, and that's where the real human cost started to pile up. What made it so difficult to clear was the terrain itself. The I-20 corridor runs through rolling ground where bridges and overpasses are the first things to ice over, and even a modest elevation change becomes a serious problem when you've got an inch of ice on the road and a loaded 18-wheeler trying to climb it without enough traction to keep moving. Troopers from Louisiana State Police were out there working on foot, going cab to cab to wake drivers so traffic could inch forward, and conducting welfare checks by ATV. Because at that point, the situation had stopped being a traffic jam and turned into something closer to a rescue operation. Now the numbers are bad enough on their own, but the actual experience of the people stuck out there tells a different kind of story. Michelle Johnson, a nursing assistant from Ruston, spent 21 hours trapped on what was supposed to be a 35-minute drive home from the hospital in Monroe. And while she was stuck out there in the dark, the temperature dropped below 20 degrees. She and her coworker had blankets and... So here's where it connects to the bigger economic picture, because this wasn't just bad luck with the weather. Louisiana's infrastructure created the conditions for this kind of failure, and the gaps are worth understanding. The state does not have the salt reserves or the specialized de-icing equipment that northern states keep on hand year-round. And even though DOTD stockpiled a record 10 million pounds of salt and 200,000 gallons of brine statewide before the storm came, 3.3 million pounds of salt deployed during the event still wasn't enough. DOTD's own public information officer acknowledged that once ice accumulates to several inches and temperatures drop into the low 20s, almost all pre-treatment loses its effectiveness. And that's exactly what happened here. Driver experience is the other piece of this. People in the South simply don't get the kind of regular exposure to ice and snow that turns winter driving into muscle memory. And that's not a knock on anyone. It's just the reality of where they live and how often these events actually show up. What the storm exposed, in other words, was not one single failure, but a whole chain of gaps between what the state was set up to handle and what actually hit it. The response did eventually come, and it came with serious firepower behind it. Monday morning, January 26, Louisiana State Police escorted heavy-duty wreckers and National Guard personnel into the hardest-hit stretches of the corridor, and the Guard started bringing food and water to motorists who had already been stuck out there for 30 hours or more. FEMA had pre-staged 250,000 meals, 400,000 liters of water, and 30 generators at Camp Minden before the storm even made landfall, and the federal government moved $3.79 million directly to Louisiana to support the response. Governor Jeff Landry held multiple briefings during the crisis, and one line from him stood out above the rest, when he told the public that just because a road is passable does not mean it's safe. By Tuesday, January 27, Trooper Davis announced that Interstate 20 had finally started flowing again. But delays continued even after that, because a few 18-wheeler drivers had left their trucks completely unattended in the middle of the highway. Full reopening in both directions didn't come until Wednesday, January 28. And even then, officials warned that some exit and entrance ramps remained closed due to ice that was still sitting on the ground. The storm did far more damage than just shutting down one highway, and the death toll across Louisiana alone reached between 8 and 9 people. 3 of those deaths were confirmed as hypothermia. 2 more were suspected hypothermia cases still under investigation, and the others included a carbon monoxide poisoning, a fatal crash on icy roads, and 1 death when an oxygen concentrator failed during a power outage. At the peak of the storm, more than 143,000 customers lost electricity, and thousands of them went without power for over a week afterward, with Entergy estimating that some areas wouldn't see full restoration until February 5th. Across the whole country, Winter Storm Fern killed an estimated 52 to 80 or more people and caused somewhere between $8 to $15 billion in insured losses. And Louisiana's share of that toll represented a serious chunk of the national damage. What happened on I-20 wasn't exactly without precedent. And looking back at